Unleashed, and in this Forever Fix video, I will cover the behavior door bolting. So if your dog runs out the door whenever you open it and is hard to get back, this is the video for you. Door bolting is a behavior that is not only frustrating, but it's also dangerous because, depending on your environment, you might have a busy road or an area where your dog could get lost if they are off leash and are not responsive to verbal cues. So this is a behavior that you don't want to ignore. You definitely want to address it. And your first line of defense in dealing with door bolting is coming up with management strategies. Management strategies are things that you can do to prevent the behavior from occurring in the first place. So it's something you are changing about your home environment. So for example, if you know the issue is you opening the door because your dog's going to run out, set up your environment so that can't happen. So before you open the door, your dog can be in their crate or in a different room of the house or on a leash even though they're inside. Just keep the leash by the door. If you have to hook up the leash before you open it, it takes an extra 2 seconds, but it keeps your dog from running out the door to chase something or disappear. So anything that prevents the issue from occurring in the first place, we would put under the category of management. This can also be gates in your home. Baby gates are awesome, or you can buy pet gates as well. They're essentially the same thing. And you can put these in doorways to section off parts of your home. So that's a great thing to do if you need to have the door open for a chunk of time, like you're unloading groceries, for example. Maybe your dogs don't have crates. Put the gates up, then they can't get out either. And you can also be creative with this. So the options I mentioned are common solutions, but if there's something that your dog loves to do and it keeps them well distracted when the door is open, do that as well. You know, fenced in backyard with a toy while you have the front door open while you're doing something. You know, there are so many options if you know your dog and if you alter their environment a little bit, sometimes it can completely prevent the issue from occurring in the first place. Once you have a solid management plan in place to prevent your dog from being able to run out the door, then you can start to focus on training. And there are a lot of training-based solutions here. I'll give you a few suggestions, but you can take it and run with it based on your individual dog and environment. What you want to remember with training is that you want the behavior to be very, very strong in an easy and non-distracted setting before you work up to something more difficult, like an open door when your dog is prone to run out the door. So the first exercise I recommend is practicing sit-stay at the door. But in order for your dog to be able to do this, they need to have a strong sit-stay before you practice at the door. So train a really strong sit, train a really strong stay, and then when your dog is ready, what you're going to do is set up a scenario where you practice this in front of the door. So you would hook up your dog to a leash or a tether for safety. You would walk close to the door and then you would ask for a sit. You would ask for a stay, and then you would slowly move as if you're going to open the door. If your dog pops out, that's where you reset them and you start over. And then you slowly build up to being able to keep your dog in that position, or rather, they're deciding to stay in that position while you open the door. Keep the leash on, but you'll start to see that the more you practice this, the less likely your dog is to move towards the door when you go to open it. And then another really key thing here is when your dog is ready for you to open the door and not pop out of their stay, do not reward them until you close the door again. Because a really great setup for them to have mentally is that the treats don't come until the door is closed and everyone is securely inside. So sit, stay, open the door, close the door, and then reward. And you would just build up more time and more distance and more difficulty as you do that. Remember with training, if it's too hard, drop down to easier steps. If it's too hard at the door, go back in the living room and do it for a little bit longer before your dog tries at the doorway again. But sit, stay, and sit, wait at the doorway, it's an excellent starting point for training. In addition to the sit, stay, you can also train some other incompatible behaviors. Remember that if you have a problem behavior, always ask the question of what do I want my dog to do instead? So maybe it's not a sit stay, maybe your dog is too high energy to be able to handle that during something as exciting as the door opening. Maybe it's a retrieve. Train your dog that when you open the door, they're supposed to go find something. If you train them with a retrieve like that, then as soon as you open the door, they start to go somewhere else that is not the doorway at all, which is again something that you would much rather have your dog do. And then When you have that situation where the door is open, it really decreases the chance that they're going to run out because they're already busy doing something else. And as always, when they return with that thing that they retrieved, that's where you would reward them. So those are just 2 examples of some simple skills you can use at the doorway. In addition to that, be in the habit of every time you exit your home with your dog, you can ask for a stay or a wait at the doorway. So if you are going on a walk, you have your dog on a leash, before you just walk right out the front door, ask for a sit stay, and then once you're ready, say okay as a release word, and then proceed through the door. If your dog is in the habit of not going through the doorway until you give a release word like okay or free, that's another way to slow them down. They see a doorway and they think, okay, that means I need to wait instead of I need to run. So every time you go in or out of the door with your dog, get in that habit as well. It doesn't need a ton of fancy training steps. It's just something you do as a habit, and it will become their habit as well. Another important consideration to make in the training process is, why is your dog running out the door? Remember, we're looking at what the dog can do instead, but also why the behavior is occurring in the first place. So there's a big difference between a dog that runs out the door just because they don't know they shouldn't, and a dog that's running out the door because you live next to a farm and they have a high prey drive. Those are 2 completely different motivations. So if your dog is the former, they've just never been trained not to do this, that's one thing. But if you live in a situation where your dog is really being tempted every time you open that door because of something like livestock that are across the street, or a neighbor's cat that is always sitting in your driveway and your dog wants to chase it, those are different situations. So you also want to figure out as best you can why your dog is doing it. That way you can figure out what strategy is best. A sit stay in the doorway when there's a stray cat right outside, it's not going to work. It's going to be too much for most dogs. So that's where you also examine the situation to determine where you can use training and where management is really needed, because the situation is just less than ideal for anyone. So having a solid management plan plus a training plan put together is going to prevent and reteach a better behavior to your dog to get door bolting under control. However, you always want to have an emergency plan, and that's really the third part of dealing with door bolting. You can manage and you can train, but you also must plan for emergencies, because life is messy and does not go according to a perfect training schedule. So you need to know what to do when your dog runs out the door. The first thing you want to consider is what not to do. Please don't yell, scream, and chase your dog. All of those things are more likely to make your dog run farther away, faster, and not come back to you. Because 1, they think they're in trouble, or 2, they think it's a game you're playing. A lot of dogs like to be chased. So if you chase them, they keep going because they think you're playing a game. And if you're visibly angry, you also decrease the chance that your dog's going to come back to you, because they read tone very well. And if they hear an angry, loud person, they don't want to go to that person, even if it's their person. So avoid chasing, avoid yelling in any sort of angry tone. When your dog bolts out the door, here's some things you can do. Number 1, train an emergency recall. It is the skill that is most likely to save your dog's life, and it's so easy to train, so please check out the video on how you do that. If you can yell a phrase and your dog comes happily running back to you because they think you have the best thing in the world, that's going to get them back in the house much easier than trying to chase them. So please check that out. Please do that if you have not. Other things you can do would be, instead of chasing your dog, you can let your dog see that you're there, and then you run in the opposite direction that the dog is going, because then all of a sudden you just flipped that game of chase. They're not supposed to be being chased by you anymore. They're supposed to be chasing you, so they come to you. So don't run after the dog, run the other way. You can also get really playful. Dogs understand our body language pretty well. So if you show a play stance, chances are they're going to get excited and run to you to play. I have used this before and it worked wonders. So if that dog is off leash and you don't know what to do, you can try getting really playful. This kind of stance where you make almost like a play bow, or whatever that stance is that you normally do when you engage your dog in play, oftentimes that really sucks them in and they're probably going to happily run to you. And then at that point, you have their attention. So use their touch or their name or their recall, whatever you need to happily jog back in the house. And then what's also really important to consider is some other weird things you can do as a human to make your dog interested in what you're doing and less likely to run away. So those can be things like laying down on the ground. I know that sounds odd, but it works. Dogs are not used to seeing you do that out front of your house. If your dog is running around and you get down on the ground, chances are they're going to come over to investigate. And that's where you can then either pick them up or snag their collar or clip a leash, whatever you have to get them back in the house happily. And remember, check your tone, always. We are excited, we're not freaking out. Even though internally you're freaking out, just pretend like we're playing a game and the game is now to get back in the house. And then what's especially important is when you get back in the house from your emergency situation, do not scold your dog. Do not yell at them. Do not angrily crate them or anything like that. Instead, you run to the fridge and you give them a helping of the best thing you have in there that's dog safe. Because what that does is it increases the chance that in the future, when your dog gets out and they shouldn't be out, they're going to remember that time where they got out and then you ran back inside and gave them the best thing in the world. And that's super powerful. So even though internally you're panicking and probably angry and upset, do not show it. Give them the best thing ever. And then you have solidified that running out of the house but coming back is a good thing. And that is exactly what you need to do to keep this behavior under control. So door bolting is a frustrating and a dangerous behavior, but there are things you can do to get that behavior under control. Remember, management is the key to preventing, training is the key to teaching your dog what to do instead, and an emergency plan is the most important thing you can do for when life does not go as planned. You can get your dog back to you safely. As always, please make sure you like and subscribe for new content. Thanks so much for staying tuned, and I'll see you next time.